Good morning, everybody. Today let's discuss about infection. Under this infection, we'll be dealing with the different types of microbes, what are the various types of infections or how we can classify them, the sources and reservoirs of infection, modes of transmission of infections, what are the determinants of pathogenicity and how an organism can evade the immune response, various types of infectious diseases, and a little bit about preventive aspects of infection. There are different types of microbes. Firstly, saprophytes. What are saprophytes? They are free-living organisms which are present in the water and the soil, but they are unable to invade the living tissues. Next come the commensals. Commensals are harmless organisms. They live on the living host as normal flora and they normally do not cause any kind of infection. What are opportunistic pathogens? These are the organisms which produce a disease in an immunocompromised state. That is, they produce a disease only when an opportunity arises. The opportunity being the lowering of immunity. Next, pathogens. They are capable of causing any kind of a disease. These are the various types of microbes or organisms. Following an entry of a microbe, this various things can happen. Firstly, infection. What is an infection? An entry, fixation, multiplication and an invasion of a microbe through normal anatomical barriers of the host is called an infection. It can produce an infectious disease and also elicit an immune response. The other thing which can happen is colonization. There is entry, fixation and multiplication of the organism without invasion of the microbe through the normal anatomical barriers of the host. There is no disease and there is no elicitation of any kind of an immune response. That is called as colonization. Now, what is infestation? This is mainly referred for parasitic infections. Parasitic worms present in the intestines, arthropods or on the body surface is referred to as infestation. How can you classify infections? Firstly, a primary infection. This is an infection for the first time with a microbe. What is a reinfection? Subsequent infection by the same microbe. Cross infection. It is a new infection in a patient who is already suffering from some disease and this new infection is from another host or a source. This is called as a cross infection. What is a secondary infection? Infection followed by lowered immunity by the pre-existing disease. That is a secondary infection. It is a subclinical infection wherein infection is there without any kind of clinical manifestations. Nosocomial infection. Any kind of a cross infection happening in a hospital or acquired in a hospital is called as a nosocomial infection. Iatrogenic infection. This is followed by any kind of investigative and therapeutic procedures in the hospital. For example, dialysis, post-transfusion, surgeries, injections, lumbar puncture or any kind of catheterization. These kind of infections are called as iatrogenic infections. Lastly, latent infection. The microbe may remain in a hidden state in the human body and can multiply followed by decreased host resistance. That is, when the immunity gets lowered, this organism will activate itself and cause a disease. That is called as a latent infection. See, what is a chain of infection? A chain of infection is going to start from the portal of entry all the way how it spreads and what all are involved in this chain of infection. Let's see them one by one. Portal of entry, how it is entering into the body. Who is the person at risk? That is a susceptible person who is capable of acquiring an infection. What is a causative agent? That is a pathogenic organism. Then the reservoir or a source, that is it's going to stay in that susceptible host. how it is going to multiply, and what all happens. Next, from there, how it is going to exit that person or the source and transmit to other person. That is means of exit, or and then going from the mode of transmission, that is how it is going to be spread from one person to another person. So this is a cycle or a chain of infection. So anywhere you want to prevent an infection, you got to break the chain in any one step of this chain of infection. Different sources of infection. There are two kinds of sources: exogenous sources and endogenous sources. Exogenous sources are all those sources of infection which are external, that is outside the human body. The first source can be a human source, that is an infectious agent transferred from a patient or from a carrier. Now, who is a carrier? Carrier can be of various types. Somebody who is carrying a disease. But what are the different kinds of carriers? There can be a healthy carrier, wherein the person develops into a carrier without actually developing a disease. The person gets infected but does not develop any kind of a disease. So that person is called as a healthy carrier. Convalescent carrier, a person who has recently recovered from the disease. That person is going to carry the infectious agent and he is called as a convalescent carrier. A temporary carrier, somebody who is carrying the organism for a very short duration of a time. Chronic carrier, who is carrying the organism for a longer duration of a time. And a contact carrier for somebody who is acquiring the pathogen from a patient. So these are the various types of carriers. Another source of infection are insects. Insects, they're also acting as a vector. So these kind of diseases are called as vector-borne diseases or arthropod-borne diseases. What are the various vectors? Mosquitoes, flies, tick, mite, lice, even fleas. These are the various kinds of insects. There are two kinds of vectors: mechanical vector and biological vector. Mechanical vector, they carry the organism. The organism doesn't multiply in that vector. That is, the stage of development of the organism doesn't take place in that vector at all. It is only transferring that organism from one place to another. That is the only purpose of the mechanical vector. What about the biological vector? The organism multiplies in that body of the vector. That is, one stage or at least two stages of the development of the organism take place in that vector. That's when it is called as a biological vector. Animal source. What are zoonoses? These are the infectious diseases transmitted from animal to man. These are called as zoonoses. Various types of zoonotic infections are there. Let's see them one by one. Bacterial infections: leptospirosis and plague transmitted from rats, anthrax from sheep, tuberculosis from cattle, that is bovine tuberculosis. Viral diseases: rabies from dog, Japanese bee encephalitis from the pigs. Protozoal diseases: toxoplasmosis from cat, helminthics diseases, hydatid disease from dog, cysticercosis from cattle and pig. And fungal diseases: zoophilic dermatophytes, which are transmitted from dogs and cats. So these are the various zoonotic infections. Sources. Water can act as a source, that is contaminated water. Different diseases which or organisms which spread through this contaminated water are Vibrio cholerae, hepatitis A virus, hepatitis E virus, and typhoid bacilli. By contaminated food in the form of food poisoning, diarrhea, or dysentery, organisms which are spread are few organisms: there is Staphylococcus, Shigella species, and Clostridium botulinum. And these are all, what all we have discussed till now are all exogenous sources. Now, what do you mean by endogenous sources? Endogenous sources, the source of the organism is actually within the human body, but they are from commensals which actually cause an infection not in the same place where they reside, but in some other system of the body. Suppose let's take an example of E. coli. E. coli is a normal commensal in the gastrointestinal tract, but it's not causing an infection there. If by chance it enters into the urinary tract, that is where it is going to cause a UTI. that becomes an endogenous source for UTI, that is urinary tract infection. Similarly, Streptococcus viridans causing infective endocarditis. Move on to the different modes of transmission. Contact mode. There can be direct contact or through indirect contact. An infection can spreading by direct contact, example gonorrhea, syphilis, and HIV. Infection spreading through indirect contact, that is through contaminated fomites like toys, pencils, or clothing. Examples: diphtheria, trachoma, shigellosis. Other mode of transmission by inhalation. Secretions from the respiratory tract infections can spread from one person to another by the sneezing, speaking, or coughing in the form of droplet nuclei or even aerosols. Few examples of the infections which spread by inhalation are influenza, tuberculosis, measles, whooping cough. Other modes of transmission by ingestion through contaminated food and water. Either there can be direct ingestion of microbes, for example, cholera and dysentery, or there can be ingestion of preformed toxins, for example, Bacillus cereus toxin and staphylococcal toxin. So it can be either through ingestion of microbes or by preformed toxins. Next mode of transmission is inoculation, wherein the pathogens are entered through some injury. Example: tetanus spores, rabies virus, HIV, hepatitis B virus, and hepatitis C virus. Next mode of transmission is vertical transmission. It can spread from the mother to the child either in utero by transplacental spread, during delivery through an infected birth canal, or after birth by ingestion of breast milk. So what are all the organisms which can spread in utero? Listeria monocytogenes causing neonatal sepsis, Treponema pallidum causing congenital syphilis, Parvovirus B19 causing hydrops fetalis, Toxoplasma gondii, cytomegalovirus, rubella, and herpes virus. There are some infections which are teratogenic infections. For example, Streptococcus agalactiae causing neonatal meningitis, Neisseria gonorrhoeae causing gonorrhea, Chlamydia trachomatis causing pneumonia and conjunctivitis, HIV, hepatitis B virus, hepatitis C virus, and herpes simplex 2 virus. These are the organisms which can cause teratogenic infections. And those organisms which can spread by ingestion of breast milk, example HIV, cytomegalovirus, and Staphylococcus aureus. Let's move on to pathogenicity and virulence. What is pathogenicity and what is virulence? Pathogenicity of an organism is the ability of the organism to produce the disease or tissue injury. What do you mean by virulence? Virulence is a degree of pathogenicity by a particular strain. An organism can be either highly virulent or avirulent. Highly virulent organisms can produce severe disease. Avirulent strains are the ones which are used in vaccine preparation. Can we alter the virulence? Can we alter it? Yes, we can either enhance the virulence or decrease the virulence. Enhancement of virulence is called as exaltation. This is done by serial passage of microbes in a susceptible host. Attenuation is reduction of the virulence by either growing them under unfavorable condition, or by growing the organism in an artificial medium, or by prolonged storage, or by even growing in the presence of weak antiseptics. So these are the 4 different ways how we can reduce the virulence of an organism. On to various virulence factors. Route of transmission itself can act as a virulence factor. What is the infective dose of the organism? Next, various adhesive factors, the invasiveness of an organism, different enzymes an organism produces, antiphagocytic factors, how nicely it can survive intracellularly, and various kinds of toxins an organism produces. So these are all the various virulence factors. We will go through one by one. Bacteria initiate infection at the site of entry. For example, streptococci. and some survive only when introduced at an optimal route. For example, Vibrio cholerae is infective orally, but the same organism is not going to produce a disease if you are going to infect it some other site of entry. Suppose by inhalation, it's not going to cause a disease because that organism is grown, or its innate nature is to cause an infection only when infected orally. So that's why route of transmission plays a major role in how the organism is going to initiate an infection. Infective dose. What is the minimum infective dose? It is a minimum inoculum of an organism capable of initiating an infection. Some organisms can produce an infection even at very low infective doses. For example, Shigella or E. coli. Some organisms require high infective dose. For example, Salmonella and Vibrio cholerae. Higher the virulence, lower the infective dose required for producing an infection. And the immune status of a susceptible host also matters when you're thinking about an infective dose. If the immune status of a person is weak, then even a very low infective dose is enough to initiate an infection. Moving on to adhesion. Adhesion is mediated by adhesins, and these bind to specific host receptors. So different organisms will have different kinds of adhesins. They facilitate the bacterial invasion. Mainly they facilitate adhesion. Secondly, they facilitate invasion. Example, Fimbria or pili, and non-pilous adhesins like M protein or lipoic acid. So these are the various adhesins which can initiate adhesion of the organism to the host cell. And this adhesion is highly required mainly to prevent the bacteria from getting flushed away. These adhesins are also antigenic in nature. Virulence factor is the production of a biofilm. Not all the organisms, but there are few organisms which have the capacity to produce a biofilm. What is a biofilm? The group of bacterial cells which stick to each other on a surface. That surface in the hospital setup is usually catheters, implants, and heart valves. All these places we are able to see biofilm formation. And then there's embedded within a self-produced matrix of extracellular polymeric substance called a glycocalyx. So this group of bacterial cells are all embedded within this glycocalyx. On to invasion. So the first step of this virulence factor is going to be the organism coming in, sticking on or producing a base for setup of that infection on the host cell receptor. Now how is it going to invade? The entry of the bacteria into the host cell is going to lead to the spread of the disease. They can be highly invasive or less invasive. Highly invasive organisms usually produce spreading or generalized lesions, for example, streptococcal infections. And less invasive organisms are usually going to produce localized lesions, for example, staphylococcal abscess. Different enzymes an organism can produce. These enzymes are all going to help in invasion. A few examples of enzymes are hyaluronidase, collagenase, streptokinase, IgA protease. Different organisms produce various kinds of enzymes. Phagocytic factors. First of all, among the antiphagocytic factor is a capsule. It prevents the phagocytes to adhere to the bacteria. For example, Neisseria, Pneumococcus, Klebsiella, Cryptococcus neoformans. These organisms have the production of a capsule. Next is cell wall proteins. They help in invasion. Third kind of antiphagocytic factors are cytotoxins. They interfere with chemotaxis or killing of the phagocytes. For example, hemolysins produced by Staphylococcus aureus. There are few organisms which actually evade the immune system by surviving intracellularly. They survive inside the host cell. Here's a whole list of organisms. Let's go through one by one. First, the bacterial organisms: Salmonella, Brucella, Legionella, Mycobacterium tuberculosis, Mycobacterium leprae, listeria, rickettsia, and chlamydia. All the viruses are intracellular organisms. Next, examples of fungi: Histoplasma, Cryptococcus. Examples of parasites which can survive intracellularly are Toxoplasma, Cryptosporidium, Plasmodium, Babesia, and Trypanosomes. Surviving intracellularly. It can either be by inhibition of phagolysosome fusion. This fusion of the phagosome with the lysosome, leading to the production of phagolysosome, can be prevented. This inhibition takes place. Second, whatever these lysosomal enzymes are being released, if those enzymes are not able to work or kill or destroy the organism, that is called as resistance to lysosomal enzymes. That way also an organism can survive intracellularly. And the third is adaptation to cytoplasmic replication. Move on to the next virulence factor, that is toxins. There are two kinds of toxins, exotoxins and endotoxins. Exotoxins are heat labile proteins which are released by the bacteria. Endotoxins are actually an integral part of the cell wall. It is lipid A portion of the lipopolysaccharide, and they are released by the bacteria only by the lysis of the cell. They are not released in the form of proteins. They are released by lysis of the cell. Mechanisms of endotoxins. Firstly, macrophage activation by interleukin 1, interleukin 6, tumor necrosis factor alpha, and they present in the form of fever and inflammation. Next one is activation of alternate pathway of complement by the complement components C3A and C5A. It produces fever, promotes inflammation and hypotension. Next mechanism is by activating the endothelial cells, platelets and mast cells and increasing vascular permeability. Lastly, by activation of coagulation pathway by activation of Hagman factor, leading to DIC. So these are the various mechanisms how endotoxins play a role. Moving on to exotoxins. They are highly potent. These are the ones which can be used for vaccines. They converted to toxoids by treatment with formaldehyde. The toxoids lack pathogenicity but will retain the antigenicity. That is, they are capable of producing antibodies. And they are specific for a particular tissue. They are not generalized. Examples of exotoxins: enterotoxin, toxic shock syndrome toxin, diphtheria toxin, botulinum toxin, anthrax toxin, Shiga toxin, and cholera toxin. Differences between endotoxin and exotoxins. Endotoxins are lipopolysaccharide in nature, whereas exotoxins are protein in nature. Endotoxin is mainly the cell wall of the gram-negative bacteria, that is lipid A component of lipopolysaccharide. And exotoxins are secreted by the organisms. Endotoxins are released by cell lysis, whereas exotoxins are secreted. The mode of action of endotoxin is by increased interleukin-1 production and tumor necrosis factor alpha. Exotoxin has an enzymatic-like action. The effect of an endotoxin is usually in the form of fever and shock. An exotoxin is specific on a particular tissue. So whichever tissue it has an affinity, that particular tissue it's going to cause an effect. Endotoxin has no specific tissue affinity. Exotoxins are specific to that tissues. Endotoxins, no fatal dose, and exotoxin being very highly potent, they have certain exotoxins have certain fatal doses. Since endotoxins are poorly antigenic, they are not neutralized by any kind of antibodies. It's ineffective. Exotoxins are highly antigenic and hence they are neutralized by the antibodies which are produced because of exotoxins. Endotoxins, they are not used for vaccine preparation. Exotoxins can be toxoided and they can be used for preparation of vaccines. The various virulence factors in a nutshell. We have seen about additions, pili, capsules, various kinds of adhesins, virulent enzymes, the lipopolysaccharide. Next, plasmids, toxin-producing phages, and virulent surface proteins. So we have not yet spoken about plasmids and the rest of few other bacterial virulence factors. We'll see what are those. There are some things which are called as special mechanisms of pathogenicity. These are not there in all the organisms. They're very specific for a few organisms. One is pathogenic islands. They are a set of genes present in the bacterial chromosomes which encode for several virulence factors. They are seen in certain organisms like Shigella, Salmonella, Vibrio cholerae, Yersinia pestis, Staphylococcus aureus, and uropathogenic E. coli. Next comes plasmids. These are responsible for toxin production and they are also responsible sometimes for antibacterial resistance. Those responsible for toxin production, those plasmids are present in E. coli and Staphylococcus, which are responsible for the enterotoxins. Next comes superantigens in the form of either toxins or viruses. They cause non-specific activation of T cells, which result in autoimmune-like response by producing large numbers of interleukin 1 and 2. And this huge response of production of interleukin 1 and 2 results in loss of specific T cell clones. They're called as superantigens. Let's see what are the different types of infectious diseases. Depending on the location, they can be either localized or generalized. Localized diseases can be superficial or deep-seated. Generalized diseases, wherein it involves the whole body, can be either bacteremia, septicemia, wherein it is because of the presence of bacteria and their toxins together causing harm to the human body. Pyemia, wherein there is bacteria, toxins, and multiple abscesses in various internal organs. On the spread of the disease, they can be classified as endemic, epidemic, and pandemic. What are endemic infections? They are persistent, low levels of infections in a particular area. That is called as endemic infections. For example, typhoid and malaria. They can be endemic to a particular area or geographical area in the world. That is called as endemic infections. Next is epidemic infections. These are the infections that occur in higher rate in a particular period. That is, for example, influenza and adenovirus. These epidemics can rise in some particular duration of time and then they subside. That is called as epidemic. Next is pandemic. Pandemic is something wherein the infection spreads rapidly to many parts of the world. Usual mode of spread is through either water or air. For example, influenza pandemics, cholera pandemics, plague pandemics, and of course, recent one, COVID-19 pandemic. We have learnt about the chain of infection and each part of that chain of infection. We've learned about the source, we've learned about the mode of transmission and how a person can get infected, and then about the virulence and pathogenesis, pathogenicity of an organism. We have learned about what are the various virulence factors which is specific to that infectious agent. So once we have learned about all this, if we want to break the chain of infection, we can break it at any of these places. We can either break it at the port of entry, we can either break it at the mode of transmission, or by destroying the infectious agent, or by preventing that source of infection, breaking that barrier, and even at the means of exit. Suppose the infection can spread from one person to another, so we can prevent that spread. So this is the basic way how we can prevent this chain of infection, by breaking this chain. And of course, how to avoid infections in the hospitals, limit visitors, and of course, no visitors at all.